If you'll please notice at the bottom of your sheet in the rectangle, our next class will be here on Tuesday, not Wednesday, and that is because some other group beat us to it for this space.
That they're closer to God.
Probably is.
They are not. That's a long time.
It was a simple guess.
All right, so next Tuesday at 2. It really is not possible for me to put into lengthy words the genius of Mozart. I can indicate to you, as I did last week, the number of great minds that considered Mozart a great genius, some the finest genius of all. But I can't put that in words. Only the music can do it. And we therefore have a lot of music today, and maybe some that you're not terribly familiar with. We begin with the opera Idomeneo. Between the ages of 14 and 24, Mozart wrote well over 200 compositions, operas and concerti, divertimenti, etc. And you will notice, if you have CDs or records or some means of playing music by Mozart, you will notice that after the name of the title of the piece, you will see a K or a KV. And I neglected to mention that last week because actually it fits in much better this week. Mithridate, the opera that he wrote when he was 14, was K87. And he wrote 4 other operas, 2 incomplete operas, and 2 stage works after Mithridate before his first complete masterpiece, Idomeneo, which is K366. That K stands for Ludwig van Koekel, who was a German scholar. In 1862, he published a list of all of the compositions of Mozart in the order in which he thought Mozart composed them. And he did this by going into letters, travel accounts, etc. Mozart did not use the opus technique, opus 1, work 1, opus 2, opus 3, opus 4. It's done with the K, standing for Koekel, and as the numbers get larger, the work gets later. The last of them, K626. Just in case you didn't know about the Koekel numbers. Leopold really was anxious for his son to make a name of himself in Paris and to get an appointment in Paris. And so he sent him off to Paris in his early 20s, but always keeping that iron fist on his little boy, who was 22 at the time. He sent his mother along with him.
Sorry.
That's quite all right. Mozart really vehemently disliked Salzburg But he didn't like Paris any better. It was the Parisians that bothered him. He loved French music, and some of the French composers he thought were miracle men, but the mentality of the Parisians really got to him, and he was very happy to leave. His mother died in Paris. He stayed on very briefly, did not make a name for himself there, did not get a major appointment in Paris, and on his way home, stopped in Mannheim, where he thought that he was going to be accepted by Alicia Weber, a woman that he was passionately in love with. Well, she turned him down, and Mannheim, by the way, had the finest orchestra in Europe at the time, and a number of its members became friends of his. What was it about Salzburg that he so disliked? Well, first of all, he worked for the Prince Archbishop, who was a complete ass, a total maniac madman, who would get as much out of his employees as he could for as little as he could. And he would make Mozart eat with the cooks and the chamberladies, below the footmen and other servants. In other words, Mozart was reduced to the lowest level among the Prince Archbishop's workers. He also was not particularly fond of the people in Salzburg. He thought they were provincial. But while in Salzburg, he wrote two compositions that he never finished. Thomas, wonderful choruses. Zaid, an opera that he didn't finish. We'll end the class today. Some of you will hear the first music from Zaid you've ever heard. Oh, goodness, from Munich comes a request to write an opera seria in 1780. His life's passion and desire was to write an Italian opera seria, serious opera. And the request came from Munich, and he was given a librettist, Abbe Varesco, who was an idiot, knew absolutely nothing about writing a libretto. And so for the preparation of the opera, Mozart from Munich had to write to his father, who was a friend of Varesco, and tell his father to tell Varesco, rewrite that poem, cut this out, etc., etc. So Mozart's father became the intermediary as Varesco was building the libretto. Mozart actually wrote down that he had three objectives in creating the Idomeneo opera seria. First, that he was going to cut it as much as possible to make it brief, to the point, and a non-stop unfolding of a music drama. He's way ahead of Wagner in thinking that way. That was Wagner's ultimate musical idea, to create a music drama without interruption. And those of you that know Wagner know that during an act, you don't clap and bravo, brava, bravi, etc. You do not interrupt the act. And Mozart was moving toward that. He never accomplished it completely, but there are segments in Idomeneo that will go for 13, 15, 18 minutes without a break. So he was going to cut it. He was going to secondly make sure that all the action was as natural as could be, even though the story has supernatural elements, which I will explain in just a moment. And thirdly, he was going to accommodate the needs of the singers. In other words, the arias would be written for the singers. He knew who was going to sing what role. Idomeneo Rei di Creta, Idomeneo King of Crete. Kirkle 366. It's absolutely unique in opera history. He was asked to write an opera seria, but he couldn't. It's half Italian and half French. Very briefly, the plot of this opera, which had its world premiere on the 29th of January 1781 in Munich. The plot, very simply, Idomeneo is one of the Greek kings returning home from the Trojan War. And he's almost home when there is a terrible storm at sea. So he promises Neptune, if you will save me, god of waters, I will sacrifice the first one that I see when I get on land to your honor. So Neptune saves him. And Idomeneo lands, and his men disperse, and there is a young man walking toward him, and it's his son, Idamante. And he has promised the god Neptune to sacrifice the first one he sees. And so he does everything he can to ignore his son and shoo him away. And the boy just doesn't understand. Il padre adorato, my beloved father, what's going on? Let's listen to that example at the end of Act 1 when Idamante, the boy, can't understand why his father is ignoring him. This is Anna Sophie van Otter. Again, we have a situation where a young male is portrayed by a female, in this case a mezzo-soprano, and these are called trouser rolls.
Tremendo
pretty straightforward opera seria aria. Let's finish the plot quickly because it's not terribly complicated. The main characters, there are four of them. King Idomeneo, his son Idamante, a princess by the name of Ilia, who's in love with Idamante but doesn't tell him, and Electra, or if you want it in the English form, Electra, who is a Greek princess also in love with Idamante. Those are the four central characters. And Idomeneo has to try to figure out how to get out of his fix, having promised the god Neptune what he is going to do. He gets advice: send Idamante away with Electra. Get Electra back to Argos where she lives, and Electra will be happy, and Idamante will be out of your midst. And, well, that would leave Ilia unhappy, but it solves the problem for Idomeneo. But it doesn't happen because Neptune gets irritated and sends a sea monster after the people, and they are very frightened. Idamante goes and kills the sea monster, comes to offer himself to his father as a sacrifice, but is told by Neptune, or actually by the oracle, the voice of a supernatural voice that comes and expresses Neptune's desire, that Idomeneo step down as king of Crete, install his son with Ilia, oh, that makes her very happy, as king and queen of Crete, and Electra is annoyed. So that's basically the story. The next selection of music we are going to have is a chorus. Opera seria does not have choruses. How do I explain this? Very easily. Mozart absorbed all the great music that he heard, and it was just always in his head, and when it came time to compose, the music dictated to him what it was to be. Many of his compositions were actually composed in his head before he wrote down a single note. Not all of them, but that happened from time to time. The music dictated what it was to be. And in this case, the opera libretto dictated to Mozart, not to the man that wrote it, that there had to be a chorus. So Mozart makes sure that there is a chorus. And it comes between the first act and the second act. And this wonderful chorus utilizes some muted instruments at times, but basically it is a chaconne, a French Baroque type of music that is known for the progressive harmonies that are used. The melody, if you think of the piano melody gets played note, 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 the tune with the right hand, with the left hand, the chords, generally 3 notes moving around with the left hand. That just gives you an idea of melody and harmony. And what Mozart does with these harmonies in this chorus is unlike anything that had been done before. So, more music, the great first chorus of Idomeneo. I have read scholars that know Mozart first note to last that claim that the opera Idomeneo is the greatest composition that he ever wrote, that its heroic nobility its white heat passion appears never again, even in the masterpieces to follow. I'm only commenting on what I have read others have said and passing it along to you. Another innovation of Mozart's in this opera seria. What happens in opera seria by way of the recitativo, the recitation? It's played on a harpsichord, not in Idomeneo, because the Mannheim Orchestra, the greatest orchestra in Europe at the time, happened to have been in Munich. Mozart had a number of friends in the Mannheim Orchestra, and so he creates recitativos that are accompanied by the orchestra. Never before, never again in an opera seria. In the second act, we have what some people call the showpiece of the drama, the Fior del Mar, the aria of Idomeneo, wherein he sings, "Saved from the sea, I have a raging sea more fearsome than before within my bosom. And Neptune does not cease his threats even in this. Stern God, tell me at least if my body was so close to shipwreck, for what cruel purpose was that wreck withheld? Saved from the sea, I have a raging sea within me." That's not a long poem or a lot of lyrics, but traditionally, Mozart was able to draw things out through several repetitions. And the man that played Idomeneo in the world premiere was a German by the name of Raff, R-A-A-F-F. Mozart knew him well, knew that he had a wonderful ability in the middle register and in a continuous way of going from phrase to phrase. But at age 67, he had lost the high notes. And so Mozart writes an aria just for this man. And it becomes, for those that know the opera well, what many consider to be the showpiece of the opera. It will be sung by the Englishman Anthony Rolfe Johnson.
Sabri
How do you write an Italian aria for a tenor with no high B's and certainly no high C's? Just ask Mozart. He'll do it for you. That's pretty straightforward, opera seria. And so is the next example, when Elia, the princess who is in love with Idamante, sings from the beginning of the third act, gently caressing zephyrs. Oh, fly to my beloved and tell him I adore him, and to keep his heart true to me. And you plants and tender flowers, which my bitter tears water, tell him that you never saw a love more rare beneath the sky. She's getting to the point where she's going to let this young boy know that she's in love with him. This is sung by Sylvia McNair. You know her? A woman from Ohio who has a beautiful voice. Started with an opera career and halfway through it decided to switch over to Broadway and jazz. But I think you will enjoy her singing of the Gentle Breeze aria, because she certainly, even though she's from Ohio, has a beautiful voice. More opera seria. I take it it's loud enough for all of you. If not, get your thumb up for John. Now, just when you are convinced that he's writing an opera seria, we have a quartet. The only place you would ever find a quartet in opera seria would be lasting a minute or less with 4 voices ending an act or ending an opera. Not Mozart, because he needs a quartet in the middle of the drama. He needs to have Idamante say, I'm just going to go off on my wanderings until I find death that will solve my father's problem. And he needs Elia to say, Idamante, wherever you go, I'm going with you. And he needs Idomeneo to say, miserable Neptune, why are you doing this to me? And he needs Electra to say, when am I going to get revenge? 4 different characters, 4 different things they're saying. And I have read in Alfred Einstein, not Albert, whose works I love, but Alfred, whose works I also love. Alfred Einstein claims that the quartet you are about to hear is the most ingenious and beautiful quartet in all opera. You don't have to agree with that. I'm only indicating that a major Mozartian scholar finds the blending of these 4 voices in Idomeneo one of the greatest things that Mozart ever wrote. You will hear Anthony Rolfe Johnson as Idomeneo, Anna-Sophie von Otter as Idamante, Sylvia McNair as Elia, and Ilvi Martin Pelto, a Swedish with a French, Helsinki, Finnish. Her father was Finnish, her mother was Swedish, and she has a beautiful voice. So you put 4 beautiful voices together in a Mozart quartet, and this is what you get.
Seguirti un
One scholar has described the music of Idomeneo on the one hand as being heroic and noble, and on the other hand as being transparent. In a very positive sense, when the music is said to be transparent, that means it is so light and so delicate you can't imagine an orchestra of 100 people playing anything so gently. There's a chorus. It doesn't end the opera because a long ballet ends the opera. And we're not going to have the long ballet because there's no singing in it, but the chorus that brings about, in a sense, the real end of the drama. The chorus: the people of Crete proclaim the joyous marriage of Ilia and Idamante. And again, I thought opera seria was not supposed to have a big chorus, but here's a big one. Idomeneo was enjoyed in Munich, had several performances. After Mozart's death was set aside, I'm not aware that it was played ever in the 19th century anywhere. I could be wrong. But the English in England in the 1930s revised the performance of Idomeneo. That got some Americans interested. In 1948, it was performed in this country. Can you imagine music of that quality being in oblivion? I can't. But before you all run out to buy your copy of Idomeneo, please stick around, because 18 months after he wrote that, he wrote the opera that was performed more times in his lifetime to more appreciation than any other. Will take about 5 minutes. I'm sorry for the smallness of the print on these, but they're taken out of the libretto and I can't make them bigger and get everything on the page. We're glad to have you here. The world we enter after Idomeneo, 18 months after the composition of Idomeneo, King of Crete, the world we enter in the Entführung aus dem Serai is amazingly different. It is the second most famous Germanic Singspiel ever written. The most famous is what? Die Zauberflöte by Mozart. My point being that the two finest Singspiels ever composed were by the same Mozart. 3 things happened in that 18 months between the commission for Idomeneo and Die Entführung. 3 important things that really were life-altering in Mozart's existence. The first, he literally was kicked in the seat of his pants out of the office of the Prince Archbishop of Salzburg, because Mozart was so sick of him, he went and dressed him down, and the Prince Archbishop called for one of his footmen and had him escort Mozart out of his office. And that took care of Mozart and Salzburg for basically the rest of his life, because secondly, he broke away from his father's iron clasp. They didn't have an open and threatening feud and shouting match, but it was very different. He went on his own to Vienna, no longer with parental supervision, and in Vienna carried on a romance with Aloysia Weber's sister Constanze, and invited her to be his wife, asked his father for permission. It was not given, so he goes and marries her anyway.
How old was he when that happened?
23. So the Archbishop is over with. Leopold is over with as having a grip on his life, and Constanze is in his life and remains in his life even long after his death. The Emperor Joseph II of Austria wanted to create a big, famous German theater for the production of German operas. And so he invited Mozart to compose an opera for his German theater in Vienna. And Mozart accepted and was given the story, Die Entführung aus dem Serail. That means the abduction from the seraglio, or the escape from the harem. And let me go through the story just very quickly, because it's the music of this drama that is so ultimately captivating that there are times when I don't know if I can stand it. And this may be one of those occasions. So if I'm up on the table and dancing, you know. The plot is not complicated. It's a Turkish opera. It's called Mozart's greatest Turkish opera. And he got cymbals and other instruments to give it a Turkish quality, a Turkish effect in the orchestra. It's the story of Belmonte. Again, we have 4 major characters and then a 5th one that I'm going to tell you especially about. Belmonte loves Constanza. Pirates have captured the ship on which Constanza and her maid Blonde or Blanchen and a servant Pedrillo. Pirates captured their ship and brought them to Pasha Salem, a Turkish pasha who had a large harem. And it's pretty clear that Belmonte and Constanza are lovers, that Pedrillo and Blanchen are lovers, and the 5th character and the central greatest comic character that Mozart ever created, Osmin, who is the overseer of the pasha's harem, he's in love with Blanchen. Belmonte finds out where his beloved is. He comes, pretends that he's an architect to the pasha. The pasha, by the way, never sings a word, only has a spoken part. Comes to the pasha and it says, I will be your architect. Osmin does everything he can to get rid of these English people. He hates them, except for Blanchen, who he loves. The English people decide they've got to escape from this harem because Pasha has had it. Constanza will not make love with him. She refuses categorically. I'm in love with someone else. Pasha says, I will make you number 1 in my harem. She says, no. And he said, then I will threaten you, I will torture you, I will hurt you, I will do what I have to. And she says, I don't care, torture me, but no, etc. Pedrillo comes up with the plan to get Osmin drunk. The Mohammedans don't drink. He accomplishes that. They're all ready to have an escape. Pedrillo is going to sing a song to give the other three, Constanza, Bronchen, and Belmonte, the signal that it's time to escape. He sings the song, but Asmin is onto it. He captures them, and boy, does he relish in his triumph. And Pasha says he's going to put them all to death. Then the Pasha finds out that Belmonte is the son of his all-time worst enemy. And what does the Pasha do? He doesn't execute them. He sets them free with magnanimity. And the opera is all really about clemency and doing the right thing. All right, that's the story. Because at the end, they all go off and praises are sung to the Pasha with a wonderful chorus. Now the music. In the first act, we're going to hear the finest tenor of Mozartian opera after John McCormack, a French-Canadian by the name of Leopold Simoneau. Did a radio program on him once, and we made a copy of the program and sent it off to Vancouver, where he was still living in his 80s. And I'll be damned if he didn't write the nicest letter back to us. It's not just my opinion that he's the finest Mozart singer, tenor. Anybody will tell you that knows the Mozartian operas. So, Belmonte, Constanza, Constanza. He's now at the Pasha's domain. Oh, to see you again. Oh, how anxiously, oh, how ardently my love-filled heart is beating, and a tear at our reunion will compensate for the anxious pain of separation. I already tremble and waver, hesitate and falter, my breast pounds and heaves. He can't wait to see his Constanza again. Leopold Simoneau.
Schon zittrig und wanke, schon zag ich und schwanke, schon zag ich und schwanke. Es hebt sich die schwellende Brust, Brust, es hebt sich die schwellende Brust, es hebt sich die schwellende Brust. Ist das ihr Lispen? Es wird mir so bange. War das ihr Seufzen? Es blühte mir die Wange. Täuscht mich die Liebe? War es ein Traum? Täuscht mich die Liebe? War es ein Traum? Täuscht mich die Liebe? War es ein Traum? Oh, wie ängstlich! Oh, wie feurig klopft mein liebevolles Herz, klopft mein liebevolles Herz, klopft mein liebevolles Herz. Ist das ihr Lispeln? War das ihr Seufzen? Es wird mir so bange, es glüht mir die Wange, es glüht mir die Wange. Oh, wie ängstlich, oh, wie feurig klopft mein liebevolles Herz, klopft mein liebevolles Herz, klopft mein liebevolles Herz. Schon sieht ich und wanke, schon sag ich und schwanke, oh, wie ängstlich, oh, wie feurig klopft mein liebevolles Herz, klopft mein liebevolles Herz, klopft mein liebevolles Herz, mein liebevolles Herz, mein liebevolles Herz.
This opera, by the way, was criticized by some people as being too long and the arias being too long. There's a very famous quotation Emperor Joseph said to Mozart after the world premiere that took place on the 16th of July in 1782. He said, "Well done, Mozart, but too many notes." And Mozart replied, "Only as many as there had to be, Your Highness." Belmonte's heart is pounding with excitement because he knows he's going to see Constanza, but she doesn't know yet that he's there, and her heart is full of grief. And she says, I was in love. I was so happy. I did not know the pain of love. I swore to be faithful to him, my beloved, to give him my whole heart. But how quickly my joy vanished when the Pasha asked me to be the queen of his harem. She says, no, no. Here's Annalisa Rothenberger portraying Constanza as we introduce this character to you.
Ach, ich liebte, war so glücklich, kannte nicht der liebe Schmerz. War so glücklich, kannte nicht der liebe Schmerz.
One thing to listen for when you are listening to a Singspiel by Mozart is that when he's writing for the nobility, he always writes in a noble and regal musical manner. When he writes for the servants or the underlings, he writes in a more humorous, jocular, or easygoing style. Now you need to meet Blanchen. Osmane, the overseer, wants to make love to her, and she rebuffs him constantly. And he says to her, "Poison and daggers on this girl, you obstinate thing." And she replies, "Oh, you grumpy old man, I'm not a Turkish slave who trembles at your orders. That's not the way to speak to European girls. Use tenderness. That's the way you get a girl, with tenderness and flattery." Lucia Pop, great soprano from Slovakia, portrays Blonde.
Gift und Dolch über das Mädchen, du starrköpfiges Ding.
Oh, du alter Murrkopf, ich bin keine türkische Sklavin, die bei deinen Befehlen zittert. Mit europäischen Mädchen springt man nicht so herum. Da müsst ihr euch aufs Bitten verlegen.
Now, in the German Singspiel, there is no accompaniment to the recitations. There are just spoken words. The story is told by speaking as if it were a play. And then the arias, such as you just heard, is an expression of the emotion that was just talked about or previously took place in the play, the discussion, the characters. There is no harpsichord that goes along with it as there is in Italian opera, or no orchestra as Mozart introduced in Idomeneo. So I want you to hear just a little bit of the spoken dialogue and how it carries on, just a minute or so. After that aria, Osmin says, tenderness, flattery, we're in Turkey now. I'm your master and you're my slave. You must obey. And she says, ha ha, your slave? Yes, the Pasha gave you to me as my slave. And then comes the line that makes English women love this opera more than any other. Blanchen says, girls are not things to be given. I am an English woman born to freedom. And he says, poison and daggers on this girl. I order you to love me this very instant. And so on. So let's listen to a minute of the dialogue, the way it goes on in a Singspiel.
Zärtlichkeit, Schmeicheln. Hier sind wir in der Türkei. Ich dein Herr, du meine Sklavin. Ich befehle, du musst gehorchen.
Ha! Ich, deine Sklavin?
Du bist mir vom Bassa als Sklavin geschenkt.
Mädchen sind keine Ware zum Verschenken. Ich bin eine Engländerin zur Freiheit geboren.
Gift und Dolch über das Mädchen. Ich befehle dir, mich augenblicklich zu lieben.
Dich lieben? Ha! Wag's nicht, mich anzurühren, wenn dir deine Augen lieb sind.
Freilich, wenn ich Petrillo wäre.
Das kannst du dir wohl denken, dass mir Pedrillo lieber ist als dein Blassewalk-Gesicht.
Gift und Dolch, mir reißt die Geduld hinein ins Haus.
Nicht von der Stelle. Constanze hat mich hierher bestellt. Sie ist die Geliebte des Wassers. Und es kostet mich nur ein einziges Wort. So hast du 50 auf die Fußsohlen. Also geh.
Das ist ein Satan.
Now, naturally, I wanted to give you the best recordings that I could because Gerhard Unger is the finest Pedrillo of modern times. And Gottlob, he's a tenor, and Gottlob Frick is one of the greatest basses on any recording. He plays Osmin. And in the second act, Pedrillo's plan is put in order. He gets Osmin drunk. And as you know, the Turkish Mohammedans are not to have alcohol. But in the dialogue that precedes the wonderful little duet that they sing, Pedrillo says, well, here's a little bottle, and here's a big bottle, and I'm sure you'd like the bigger bottle, and you can guess what happens. Osmin gets drunk. So let's listen to a bit of the dialogue and then the magnificent, very brief duet, Vivat Bacchus, or Hail to Wine or Drunkenness.
Na, hier geht's ja lustig zu. Dir muss es ja verteufelt wohlgehen, ne?
Nun ja, warum nicht? Fröhlichkeit und Wein versüßen die härteste Sklaverei. Wahrhaftig, Osmin, da hat euer Vater Mahomet einen gehörigen Bock geschossen, dass er euch den Wein verboten hat. Wenn das verwünschte Gesetz nicht wäre, du müsstest einen Schluck mit mir trinken, ob du wolltest oder nicht.
Wein mit dir, ja, Gift.
Gift und Dolch, Dolch und Gift. Lass doch den alten Groll fahren und sei vernünftig. Hier, sieh mal, eine große Flasche Und eine kleine Flasche Zypernwein, der schmeckt.
Wenn ich ihm trauen dürfte. Kost einmal die große Flasche auch.
Oh, du denkst wohl gar, ich habe Gift hineingetan. Aber sieh, ich trinke auch von der großen. Na, komm, Osmin. Hast du noch keinen Mut? Oder willst du die kleine?
Nein. Gib mir nur die große. Aber wenn du mich verrätst.
Wie werde ich denn? Bacchus soll leben. Viva Bacchus, Bacchus lebe, Bacchus war ein braver Mann. Viva Bacchus, Bacchus lebe, Bacchus war ein braver Mann.
Ob ich's wage, ob ich's trinke, ob's wohl Allah sehen kann.
Was hilft das Zaudern, hinunter, hinunter, nicht lange gefragt, nicht lange gefragt.
Nun wär's geschehen, nun wär's hinunter, das heiß ich gewagt.
Es leben die Mädchen, die Blonden, die Braunen, die Blonden, die Braunen. Sie leben hoch. Sie leben hoch. Das schmeckt trefflich.
Das schmeckt herrlich.
Ach, das heiß ich Götterdrank.
Viva Bacchus, Bacchus lebe, Bacchus werde in meiner Hand.
Viva Bacchus, Bacchus lebe, Bacchus wird in meiner Hand.
Viva Bacchus, Bacchus lebe.
Es leben die Mädchen, die Blonden, die Braunen, sie leben hoch. Viva Bacchus,
Viva
wird
der
in meiner Hand.
Viva Bacchus, Bacchus lebe.
Es leben die Mädchen, die Blonden, die Braunen, sie leben hoch. Viva Bacchus,
Viva
wird
der
in meiner Hand. Viva Bacchus,
Viva
wird
der
in meiner Hand.
Those two, they're incomparable. So Osmin is dead drunk. He passes out. Blanchen and Pedrillo are united. Constanza and Belmonte are united. And the second act ends with a long, too long for me to share with you, magnificent quartet. Comes to a conclusion. And they are going to follow Pedrillo's plan to escape. And he's going to sing to them, and this happens in the third act, the signal that it's time to come to the ladder that he will put up on the side of the Pasha's domain and let them descend and run to the ship which Belmonte has set aside for them to sail home in. In the third act, Pedrillo sings a most unusual aria. Mozart is trying to give it a very definite Eastern Turkish modal quality to the tenor voice, and it is quite beautiful, but it is, in my ears, a very unusual piece of music. Here's Pedrillo's Time to Escape aria.
Pedrillo,
Gerhard
ist alles
Unger.
fertig gemacht? Alles. Geben Sie Acht, dass wir nicht überrascht werden. So sei's gewagt.
Im Morgenland gefangen war ein Mädchen hübsch und fein, sah rot und weiß, war schwarz von Haar, seufzt Tag und Nacht und weinte gar, wollt gern erleben erlöset sein und gern erlöset sein. Da kam aus fremdem Land daher ein tapferer Rittersmann, dem jammerte das Mädchen sehr. Ach, rief er, wag ich Kopf und Ehr, wenn ich sie retten kann, wenn ich sie retten kann.
On your back page, I have put the famous Triumph aria. Oh, Osmin says when he catches them, oh, how I shall triumph when they lead you to the place of execution and string you up. I shall skip and laugh and jump and sing a little song of delight, for then I shall have peace of you. This is Osmin's most famous aria, and no one has ever sung it like Gottlob Fricke.
Zum Richter führen, und die Hälse schnüren zu, schnüren zu, und die Hälse schnüren zu, schnüren zu, schnüren zu, und die Hälse schnüren zu, schnüren zu. Hüpfen, wild, lachen, springen und ein Freudenliedchen singen, denn nun hab ich vor euch Ruhe. Zum Richter führen, und die Hälse schnüren zu, schnüren zu, und die Hälse schnüren zu, schnüren zu. Schleicht nur säuberlich und leise, ihr verdammten Haremsmäuse, unser Ohren denkt euch schon, und ehe ihr uns könnt entspringen, seht ihr euch in unseren Schlingen, und erhaschet euren Lohn, und erhaschet entdeckt euch schon, entdeckt euch schon, entdeckt euch schon. Oh, wie will ich triumphieren, wenn sie euch zum Richter führen, und die Hälse schnüren zu, schnüren zu, und die Hälse schnüren zu, schnüren zu. Hüpfen will ich, lachen, springen und ein Freudenliedchen Oh, wie will ich triumphieren, wenn sie euch zum Richter führen, und und die hält sich schnüren zu, schnüren zu, schnüren zu, und die hält sich schnüren zu, schnüren, 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 schnüren zu, und die hält sich schnüren zu, und die hält sich schnüren zu, schnüren zu, schnüren zu, und die hält sich schnüren zu, schnüren, 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 schnüren zu, und die hält sich schnüren zu, und die hält sich schnüren zu, und die hält sich schnüren zu, schnüren zu, schnüren zu.
Well, Pasha Salem changes his mind. Yeah, that was really something. Pasha Salem changes his mind. He's not going to execute them because he's going to show clemency to the son of his number one and much hated enemy. And so we have a vaudeville at the end, which gives the chance to all of the characters to have their say, and then a great Janissaries chorus ends the opera. The Janissaries were the military people that guarded a domain of different pashas, and so they'll end with their wonderful chorus. But let's listen to the finale, and the different characters basically are saying, "Never shall I fail to value your graciousness. Never will I forget your goodness. If I could ever forget how near I was to being strangled," and so forth. All of the four characters, the two sets of lovers, are just full of gratitude. And when Osmin chimes in, he strikes a very different note because he is absolutely furious. "The dogs should be burnt who have so disgracefully deceived us. I cannot watch it any longer. My tongue almost stiffens in my mouth at the thought of commanding their reward. First, they need to be beheaded, then hanged, impaled, put on red-hot spikes, then burnt, bound, immersed, finally flayed," and he leaves with a rage. So here is the finale to die Entführung aus dem Serai.
Nie werd ich deine Hilfe können, mein Dank bleibt ewig dir geweiht. An jedem Ort, zu jeder Zeit, werd ich dich groß und hören nennen. Wer so viel Huld vergessen kann, den sieht man mit Verachtung an. Wer so viel Huld vergessen kann, den sieht man mit Verachtung an.
Die werd ich ihm in Ost der Liebe vergessen, was der Dank gefreut. Mein Herz der Liebe ungeweiht, ich doch dem Dank geweiht liebe. Wer so viel Huld vergessen kann, den sieht man mit Verachtung an.
Wer so viel Huld vergessen kann, den sieht man mit Verachtung an. Wenn ich es je vergessen könnte, wie nah ich am Erdlosen war, und all der anderen Gefahr, ich lief, als ob der Kopf mir brennte. Wer so viel Huld vergessen kann, den sieht man mit Verachtung an. Wer so viel Huld vergessen kann, den sieht man mit Verachtung an.
Nehmt meinen Dank mit großen Freuden, Herr, was ein Lied ganz unfroh. Als mir das Schicksal will es so,
Verbrennen sollte man die Hunde, die uns so schändlich hintergehen. Es ist nicht länger anzusehen, mir steht die Zunge fast im Munde, vor ihrem Lohn zu opfern an. Erst geköpft, dann gehangen, dann gespießt auf weiße Stangen, dann verbrannt, dann gebunden, dann getauft, zuletzt geschunden. Erst geköpft, dann gehangen, dann gespießt auf weiße Stangen, dann verbrannt, dann gebunden, dann getauft, zuletzt geschunden.
Nichts ist so hässlich als die Rache. Nichts ist so hässlich als die Rache. Nichts ist so hässlich als die Rache. Großmütig, mächtig, gütig sein und ohne Eigennutz verzeihen, ist nur der große Wer dieses nicht erkennen kann, den sie man mit Verachtung an. Wer dieses nicht erkennen kann, den sie man mit Verachtung an. Den sie man mit Verachtung an.
Well, that's the Entführung. I hope you enjoyed it. And I have for you a short historic recording from Zaid, Mozart's first Turkish opera that never really made it because the one you just heard music from became so dominant throughout Germany and Europe and finally the United States and now the whole world, that Zaid, there are people that have never heard a note of the music. Here is Fritz Wunderlich, magnificent tenor who died in his 30s from a fall down a marble staircase. What a beautiful voice this man had, and he sings Herr und Freund, Lord and Friend, from the opera Zaid. Just fade it down. Well, those of you that know your Handel know that Peter put down the wrong compact disc. My mistake, not John's, but you got to hear the voice of Fritz Wunderlich, but not from Zaid. Sorry about that, but having heard that voice, is it any wonder why I collect all his recordings? Another time, next Tuesday.